Hello, and welcome back to This Day in History. It's May 18th, 2024. The sound you're hearing, that's hail. It's hail that is hitting my car. Mind you, about a minute or so ago, it came down a lot heavier. So I think it's kind of just passing on through. But we have a pretty eventful day in history for May 18th. Some good historical events, some not so good historical events. So let's just get into it, right? For birthdays, on this day in 1872, British logician and philosopher Bertrand Russell was born today. In 1920, John Paul II, that would be the Pope John Paul II, he was born on this day in 1920. If you're into Chinese action films, then you'll know this actor Chow Yun-fat. Amazing actor. I love this guy. I thought he was a lot younger than what he is, but he was born in 1955. I thought he was born in the 60s, but so Chow Yun-fat, he was a pretty cool action star. I like his work. He's right up there with Jet Li and Jackie Chan, as far as I'm concerned. I love their work. In 1957, Ai Weiwei, it was a Chinese activist and artist. Ai Weiwei was born on this day in 1957. And on this day in 1970, one of my favorite comedian actresses of, I say my generation, even though she's 5 years older than me. 1970, Tina Fey was born. And let me tell you, that woman is still a heartthrob for me. I love that woman. And if this video ever gets back to her, I love your work. Yeah. So that's it for the birthdays. On this day in 1642, the city of Montreal, that would be up there in Quebec, Canada, was founded by Paul de Chomedey. Paul de Chomedey, Chomedy. Apparently, he was a lord. I'm going to butcher the name, so I'm not even going to try. And I didn't write it down. But that happened on this day in 1642. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln becomes the Republican candidate for running for president. Now, mind you, you have to remember that, or if you didn't know, the Republican Party at the time was an independent party. It was not one of the main parties running for president. So anyone who says that an independent party can never win the presidency, it happened one time. It just so happened to be that political party, which was once an independent party, then became one of the two mainstream parties that we have today. And we have had at any one given time, we've had up to like 5 different political parties at any one time in our nation's history. And what ended up happening was that as ideologies are similarly based, they get absorbed. So all those parties were either absorbed into the Democrat Party or the Republican Party. So the Republican Party at the time was an independent party, and so it was the first time in our nation's history that the independent candidate had actually won the presidency. I'd love to see it happen again, because I think both parties are morally bankrupt, and I would just love to see, a change for the better, and that being not business as usual. And personally, I tend to agree with my one uncle who says fire them all and start over again, because it can't get any worse than that. But this is about this day in history and not political slant, so I'll stop with that. In 1896, SCOTUS, that's short for the Supreme Court of the United States, they released their decision on Plessy versus Ferguson. This was a huge deal. It dealt with um, slavery and slaves' rights. Um, it dealt with the question of what kind of rights the slaves have. Um, and basically, what this decision did is that um, Plessy versus Ferguson, the decision basically that was the term that was coined was separate but equal. So it wasn't the first form of it wasn't the first definitive act to legalize discrimination, because after all, that actually happened in the Alien Sedition Act, which I believe was in 1803, 5, somewhere in there. The Alien Sedition Act actually was originally, it was twofold. It was legal discrimination against Irish. I take that personally because I have Irish ancestry in me. Um, and it and how it passed, how the Supreme Court allowed it, probably because nobody challenged it. But the sedition part of it basically was it outlawed any kind of uh, public objection to the government. In other words, um, I do believe this was under Jefferson's presidency, and he basically took it personally when someone um, uh, spoke out against him and his policies. It's another reason why. I mean, it sounds un-American of me, but he's one of the founding fathers I don't like. I think he was I think he was a hypocrite. He had the audacity to say that all men were created equal by their creator, but yet um, unless you were black, and that might piss some of you off, but that's absolutely true. It actually, he writes as much in his diaries. The other day, I spoke of the Lewis and Clark expedition and the book that Stephen Ambrose wrote. Stephen Ambrose took a lot of excerpts from his personal diaries and Lewis's diaries, Clark's diaries, and other people. And one of the things that come about is that Thomas Jefferson had zero respect for the black man. He had more respect for the Native American because he considered them our red brothers, And while he also understood that slavery as an institution needed to come to an end, he had hoped that it did not come to an end in his lifetime. So when you have things like Plessy versus Ferguson, it's kind of, it's a sign of the times, right? And that was the general consensus of a lot of people during that time that thought that the African American was subhuman, and that they were nothing, and they were to be treated as nothing more than um like your horse or your ox. I mean, they were beasts of burden as far as people were concerned. And that's, eventually that got overturned. Um, that wouldn't be overturned until the 50s and 60s. But, this was 1896. So, you had for a good 60, 70 years of segregation. It basically legalized segregation is what it did, which is a tragedy, but it's a travesty. I'm moving right along. In 1933, the United States government establishes the Tennessee Valley Authority. And what the Tennessee Valley Authority was in charge of, they were in charge of the um, Tennessee River Valley and all its tributaries. It was to control the floods and to produce power for the all that area. In 1940, Brussels would fall to the German invasion. So it was just the other day that it said that Belgium and the Netherlands, Luxembourg had fallen. Germany had invaded and they had taken over. Well, it's on this day in 1940 that they took Brussels as well. In 1953, Jacqueline Cochran, she's the first female pilot to have broke the sound barrier. So that's pretty huge, especially being that early on. They were just getting into breaking the sound barrier in the very late 40s, early 50s. So that's something huge there. In 1974, India detonates a nuke in the I'm gonna probably butcher this, but Rajasthan desert. I can remember in the 90s where they were developing nukes and they had said that the only way to deal with the United States was to be nuclear capable. And I thought they were just getting around to getting into the technology. I didn't realize that they had the technology for 20 years already. So in 2001, Shrek, the very first Shrek, is released nationwide. Really cool movie. In 2004, Randy Johnson became the oldest pitcher in MLB to throw a perfect game. He was pitching for the Arizona Diamondbacks at the time, and he used to pitch for the Mariners, I believe. 2012, Facebook holds initial public offerings, which means that's when it became publicly traded. It was in 2012. So I'm backtracking back to 1980, 44 years ago, because I wanted to end on this note. It is on this day in 1980, 44 years ago, that Mount St. Helens blew. That's, I don't want to say it's near and dear to me, but it's, I remember it. I was, I just turned 5 a couple weeks before, almost a month before it happened. I don't remember the event itself. I just remember the aftermath of it. And I just remember, like, right now, it's not blue skies today. It's not sunny. It's not warm. It's not cold, but it's overcast. It was raining. It just hailed. You saw earlier in the video here that it was, or you heard it, that it was hailing. I do remember this overcast, gloomy stuff for several days after Mount St. Helens. I remember seeing a patch about like that, a patch of ash inside our car, and I remember asking my stepdad what that powder was, and he just kind of pointed up in the air and says, "It's ash from Mount St. Helens." So I vividly remember the time. I was so young that it's like, current affairs like that, right over. There was a lot of devastation. The Toutle River was completely destroyed. And if you go up to the Toutle River Valley now and you go look at it, you wouldn't even know that it had ever been destroyed by a volcano. Because that's the beauty of nature, is that it repairs itself. It had itself repaired in a matter of like 20 years, maybe. I can't remember how long it took, but like now, 44 years later, you go up there and there's no hint that it ever happened, other than, we have some historical markers put up saying that this happened here. We have the historical evidence of there was filmed footage of the event as it was transpiring. We have filmed news clippings from the local news, interviewing Harry Truman. Yes, that was his name, not the president, but his name was Harry Truman. He was a guy that lived up there. His wife had died years prior, and he did not want to leave his wife, and so he refused to leave the mountain. So when the mountain exploded, it buried him. Buried him alive. And his sister begged him to come off the mountain. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't leave his wife. He was an old man. He had lived his life, and he did not want to be separated from his wife, so I can commend him for that. I think it was kind of foolhardy, live to fight another day, and, honor her well, in life. I had a friend that actually met him when he was young, and he said that he was kind of cantankerous, and like, he spoke with no filter. When I worked for an oxygen therapy company, one of my patients knew him personally, and he had a story about him, about how he was running a tackle shop up on the lake up there, and some tweaker tried to rob the store at gunpoint, and it pissed the old man off, and he ended up beating the shit out of the guy with his cane, and he beat him with his cane, and when the sheriff's deputy got up there, they're like, he could have shot you. Yeah, well, he didn't. And he's like, well, why would you do that, Harry? Because he was trying to steal from me. He pointed a gun at me. So, I mean, that guy got beat by an old man. The guy was he was cantankerous. He had no filter. And so, he died up there on that mountain when it exploded, and basically what it did is it the top came up and then it slid half down, and if you were to see it now, it's the only mountain in the world where mountains tend to have a crested peak. Well, lop that top part off, and then that's what Mount St. Helens looks like. It has regrown some over the years. It had some volcanic activity where it was kind of growing back up, and at the time, this was probably like, I don't know, I want to say almost 15 years ago. I think this was happening, and well, not quite 15, about 10, 12 years, something like that. They said that, if that volcanic activity had continued, that it would grow its peak back and it would be higher than what it was before. So it was, I believe its original height wasn't much. It was kind of close to Mount Hood, which is at 11,000 in some change. I think it's almost 12,000 feet. Mount Hood is, and I think Helens was real close to that before it blew. Obviously not now, but at any rate, that is this day in history for May 18th, and we will come back and do it again tomorrow for May 19th. So do have a blessed day. Take care, and we'll chat soon. All right, bye.